we're glad that you guys have dialed in. I know for us as parents, we have been looking forward to this just to hear some wisdom from them. And, you know, they're ahead of us in stages and they have a lot to offer. So we're really excited to hear what they have to say. So that is Andy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's just so valuable to be able to talk to parents who are a little beyond the stage where you are. And so for us, with a high schooler, middle schooler, and elementary schooler, I've just been looking forward to talking to them and hearing their insight about how to parent through this season, and especially with the added layer of parenting through a pandemic. I think, you know, none of us could have imagined where we'd be at this point in 2020. And so it's just exciting to be able to talk about it and talk about at least the filters by which we're trying to make decisions, in life right now.
Parenting in a normal season is hard, and it's just exponentially harder right now. So we're just glad to have this opportunity to talk with you guys, to talk with Andy and Sandra, and we will, the rest. Hey,
you're really good stallers.
So you said great stuff. It was so good that we want to make sure people hear it. So we're going to start back over at the top and just ask real quickly, how long have you guys been married, and how old are your kids?
So we're really starting over?
Yeah, we were told we're starting over. So
well, they're older than they were the first time you asked us that question. Go ahead, Sandra.
Okay, so
we've been married 32 years. I know that answer. Go ahead.
He knows that because we had our 32nd wedding anniversary last week, and our kids are Andrew's 28, Garrett is 26. He's married to Danielle. Allie is 24. She's married to Clay. And as I mentioned before, we had a COVID-19 Monday wedding for Allie, which was lovely. It actually turned out perfect, just not exactly what we planned. And we have been foster parents for 10 years. So we've had kids in and out of foster care.
That is awesome. Well, you know, we've said before that word unprecedented keeps being used to describe the time that we're in right now. And so I would just love to hear, and I'm sure everyone would love to hear, what kind of insight do you have in terms of how to parent in this completely unprecedented season?
Well, I was alive during the first pandemic. Sandra wasn't, so that wasn't funny the second time. A little bit of age difference. So we don't know, but here's what I thought about when I saw that question, because it's a great question. As parents, we cannot help but compare our kids to other kids, and we compare ourselves to other parents. And in a time like this, I think it exaggerates that, and I think it basically shows how ridiculous that is, even though it's almost impossible to resist. So I would say to parents, look, your fear is that your kids are falling behind. They're not, because the whole falling behind thing is a myth. And we live with that, and we parent with that. Oh no, are my kids keeping up? Are they keeping up? And then, just a little heads up, once they hit 12th grade, nobody's going to be measuring their progress by 12-month increments anymore. It ends suddenly. You'll remember that. So I'd say just relax. The thing that's going to determine their success is not whether they keep up with their peers this year in school. It is 1 year within the context of their whole educational experience, within the context of their whole life. And they're going to be fine because you're being a great parent. It's their talent, their skill, their faith, their character, and their consistency that makes the difference in the long haul. Just take the pressure off and just kind of, and again, it's easier for us to say, but in hindsight, my worst parenting moments was when I fell into the comparison trap, trying to make sure they were keeping up with their friends and we were keeping up as parents. It just created unnecessary pressure, and there's no win in comparison. And our kids sense when comparison is creeping into our parenting style.
Right. And I would just say, too, it is unprecedented. Nobody has done this before. And so give yourselves a little bit of extra grace. I mean, we're all, trying new things, figuring out new schedules and new little systems in our homes. And so have constant conversations with your kids and invite them into the conversation to help you get right. And to all, and just have those conversations about everybody just needs to do a little more with each other. And maybe, all go to our own rooms from time to time or whatever.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question about pace of life. Everyone's kind of been forced to slow down for a little while. So for this season, a lot of things were taken out of our schedules, and now we're starting to kind of add things back in little by little. So as we're doing that, what advice do you have on how to make those decisions, how to manage your schedule so that you prioritize the things that matter most?
Well, we think this is a great question, but for us to answer that question, I need to provide a little bit of context that really shapes how we answer all the questions from this point forward. Every parent is parenting towards some sort of North Star. There's something in the back, and I think most parents aren't even aware of what it is. There's something that's driving you as a parent that informs your decisions or drives your decisions. And when there's two parents in the home, if they aren't operating on the same page, they have two different North Stars, that can be a decision. But I think it's very important for parents to stop and ask the question, what am I parenting toward? And I made a list of things. And I think one of the things that helped Sandra and I with this, we were in student ministry together for 10 years, working with middle school and high school students. We saw a lot of bad examples, and we saw 2 or 3 really good examples that we learned from parents who seem to have gotten this right. So parents parent out of fear, they parent out of protection, just got to protect my kids, out of ego. How are my kids reflecting on me, how they look, what they wear, what they say? Suddenly it becomes all about me. They're education-driven parents. They just got to make sure my kids have the best education. They may never speak to me again, but by golly, they're going to have good grades and they're to school. Then there's the I'm not going to parent like my parents parented. There's so much of this. I'm not going to be like my dad. I'm not going to be like my mom. And that is what Adam Johnson calls a not goal. I'm not going to be like my parents. And a not goal is not a good goal. So I think asking the question, what am I parenting toward? And then asking the question, what should we be parenting toward? And when parents come to a conclusion, and especially if they come together around a simple, what is the North Star? Then questions like pace and some of the other questions we're going to talk about, those things become much easier to decide. So for us, our goal, our North Star is, we decided when Andrew was in a car that our North Star was that our kids would want to be with us and want to be together when they no longer had to be. That they would want to be with us and want to be together when they no longer had to be. So our North Star was a relationship star. So we have parented or tried to consistently parent toward those relationships. Sandra's we'll tell you a couple of stories later on. But I think before any parent gets into the nitty gritty nuts and bolts, you got to ask,
what's the goal?
Yeah, what's the goal? Is it just protection? Is it health? Is it education? It can't be everything. So for us, we just decided it was those adult relationships.
Right. That's right. And since we were parenting toward the relationship, once you establish that, then you have to back and figure out, okay, if we're going to try to establish a pace so that we can get to that finish line the way that we want to get to it, what needs to be cut out? And that brings us to your question of, how did we determine what things were yeses and what things were nos as it relates to the pace of life we wanted to have. And so once we identified what's a realistic pace for us, then we had to do the heavy lifting of then what needs to go, what stays, what needs to go, what do we say yes to, what do we say no to. For me, in that season of heavy duty, the heavy lifting of parenting years, I was homeschooling our kids like so many people are doing during this pandemic. And so I decided there's some categories of things that are categorical no's for me in this season. And the way that we put words around that was, this is a no for now, not necessarily a no for always. And for me, I had to say no to a side hustle. I had to say no to, going and having coffees and lunches and all that kind of stuff just for that season. Those were some categorical no's, because I knew that if I wanted to do this homeschool thing well, I was going to have to be focused, and that would be for my kids, but also for me, and to have some sanity. So we identified those things that were the non-negotiables and those things that were no's for now. And that was super helpful. It was harder for me because I have a harder time saying no. I don't like to disappoint people. Andy can say no. He's fine. He's like, nah. So
you can't survive ministry if you're not willing to disappoint.
That's true.
I had to practice saying no. And there are some very gracious ways you can say no that actually end up giving other people permission to reevaluate some of their yeses and nos at the same time.
So it was no for now, but not forever. No for now, but not forever. And so we just categorically, there were just categories of things that, and coming back to our North Star, these categories were determined by what makes us relationship rich and what undermines the relationships. Because for us, this wasn't about, we didn't want our kids to be experience rich and relationally poor. And experience is another thing that drives parenting. So we just want our kids in every experience to go to everything, participate in everything. We just, once we decided we were, navigating toward a relationship, it was just easy for us
to sort it out.
To not be overscheduled. So that was a long answer, but it's an important question.
No, it's great. That's wonderful.
Great. Such good insight. When you talk to any group of parents, especially parents of young children, I feel like the topic of discipline always comes up. And I think I've heard before you guys had 3 filters that you use when it came to discipline. Could you share that with us tonight?
Yeah. When we had Andrew, we were having dinner with some friends who were a little further down the road of parenting than we were, and so I'll never forget. We had this very conversation about discipline, and they said they used the 3 Ds: disobedience, dishonesty, and disrespect. And that kind of, as we thought through it later and talked through it later, it sort of covered all the issues that we felt like were the big deal ones. It was dishonesty, disobedience, and disrespect. And so those were the things, in parenting, there are things happening all day long. You're sorting everything out, trying to figure stuff out. And there are things you just pretend like you don't see, because you don't want to deal with that or whatever. But when it was dishonesty, disobedience, or disrespect, we knew we couldn't ignore those. And we needed to be consistent, and we needed to be on it all the time. So when our kids were young, we actually used those words, those very specific words. And we would take them out of the room, and we would go have a private eye-to-eye conversation and say, you know what, that was very disrespectful when you blah, 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 or that was dishonest, or, whatever. We would use those words. And again, we were building toward relationship. We were putting those 3 Ds into categories of relational, of building relationships and being honest with other people and being respectful to other people and all of that. So those were our big things: our dishonesty, disobedience, and disrespect.
And this is so important. The reason those were big problems or big issues, stop the presses, we're going to talk about this, is because those 3 things destroyed or broke relationships. So when we would talk to our kids about telling the truth in our home, we didn't say don't lie because the Bible says don't lie. We said don't tell a lie because lying breaks the relationship. And I don't want the relationship with you broken. Dishonoring your mother breaks the relationship. So even with those 3 Ds, the reason behind those were all relationally driven, which brings us to one of the things we love to talk about, and that is, what did discipline actually look like in our house? We learned in student ministry that timeout is a waste of everybody's time. Timeout, but here's why. Timeout does not restore a relationship. And one of the most important things we can teach little children is, how do I restore a broken relationship? So when it came to disciplining our kids, because our North Star is we want to have relationships that we want them to want to be with us and with each other, when they're old enough not to have to be, it forced us to become very creative in how we disciplined our children, because we wanted to discipline toward relationships. So I've asked Sandra to tell you 2 quick stories. One, when our kids were really little, and one when one of our children was a teenager, because disciplining teenagers is so challenging. But here are just 2 examples of disciplining toward the relationship. So,
well, the first one, they weren't really little, but they were like 8 and 9 years old. Our boys were. Allie was younger, and she was kind of perfect, so she didn't. She wasn't perfect. But Andrew and Garrett, we had a particular babysitter who had come, and it wasn't one of those babysitters that wanted to give you the laundry list of all the bad things your kids did while you were gone. She wasn't like that at all. And so when I got home, she goes, "Oh, I need to tell you
Well,
something.
we always ask, how did it go?
Yeah.
And we could tell by the look on her face, it did not
So
go
I
well.
drag it out of her. So anyway, the thing that they had done, I don't remember exactly now what it was, but they had been very disrespectful to her multiple times during the evening. And so, but they were already asleep when we got home. So next morning I went and I woke them up and I said, okay, I need y'all to get dressed and I need you to get your wallets and meet me in the car. And so they got their little wallets, and they met me in the car. And I said, I kind of talked through what Cam had told me had happened. And so I said, we're about to go to Publix and you're going to use your money and you're going to buy some flowers and we're going to go visit her, Cam, the babysitter, at her office. And you're going to deliver the flowers and with a note. And so they were mortified. Mortified.
They would rather be in timeout. They would rather have their doors taken off their rooms. They would rather anything.
Please.
This was amazing. She came out with this. It was so brilliant.
So we did. So we got the flowers, we wrote notes, and we walked into her office and delivered them with a heartfelt verbal apology along with it and got back in the car. And the great thing about that particular story was instead of just some punishment, it actually restored the relationship. It was restitutional,
Yep.
it was just restitutional for them and restored the relationship. The other one, and I love to tell the story because this is like Andy's most brilliant parenting moment of all time. We had one of our sons was driving and I don't remember the exact story.
I remember the exact story. But it was
this
terrible.
particular son was very disrespectful to me. And the number one rule in our house is respect mom, as we've shared before.
Yeah, number one, we only had two rules growing up: respect your mom, or honor your mother, and don't tell a lie. That was it.
So,
and one of our sons was very disrespectful to Sandra.
So I just let it go, and then of course when he got home, I was like, "You won't believe what he wore." So I told Andy, and then Andy handled it from there. But the bottom line was his punishment was he had to call me on my phone, ask me out on a date, and take me out to dinner and buy my dinner and just build the relationship back.
That brilliant or what?
Yeah.
Quit parenting at that point.
So I answered the phone.
And what can I say one thing?
Yeah.
And he looked at me like, what? Yeah.
Just take my truck.
Right. You're going to take your mom on a date and have, because I knew if they had dinner, they had to have a what? A conversation. Yeah. Well, you can't have a dinner conversation without restoring the relationship. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So he calls me up and asks me on a date. I'm like, no, I'm not going because I'm mad. Not what I've said. I melted into a puddle. We go off riding off in his truck to go to dinner at the Macaroni Grill over on Windward Parkway. And we were sitting there having this conversation. It was so sweet. And he looked at me in the eyes and he said, Mom, I am so sorry that I was so disrespectful. Would you please forgive me? And I was like, of course I will. I mean, I'm just a wreck. So the relationship was immediately rebuilt. I mean, it was just it was great.
But the reason I like those stories is that was not the first thing that came to mind.
Right.
Right? I mean, the thing that comes to mind is take something away. So the thing that comes to mind is let's separate. You go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't restore a relationship. And I just want to emphasize this again. No matter how old our kids are, they have to be taught how do you restore a broken relationship. This is a life skill.
Life skill.
And it has to be taught. It does not come natural. We have all met adults that once you're out with them, you're just out, and they just don't know how to restore a broken relationship. In fact, they just feel like there's no point in trying. So, but again, this all came from this early on decision that we're parenting toward long-term relationships. And again, so that's great.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the relentless focus on relationship as the main factor. That is so incredibly important. And I also think it's going to be great, the amount of teenage boys that'll be taking their moms out on dates in the next couple months as a result of that story.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. All right, so let me ask you about faith. So when your kids were young, what kind of things did you do at home to help lead them to follow Jesus? And I've met your kids, and they're incredible kids. So I just want to know exactly what you did, like word for word. Was there a magic prayer
Ready to take notes.
you prayed over them that guaranteed that they would walk into adulthood with maturity? Whatever it is, we just want to know, what kind of wisdom do you have for us on talking about faith with your kids?
Beginning and then
We started with, as soon as they were out of the crib, we were praying on our knees by their beds at night
with them.
And part of that is teaching them to pray. Part of it is just making those deposits into their hearts of, the things that are important, the things that we go before the Lord with. And part of it is just laying a foundation of faith that hopefully, a little bit down the road, they would be owning for themselves. So prayer was a huge thing in our family. That was something we did together, and we did it, especially when they were young. It was nightly. So,
and can I say something to all the dads? And I know there's some moms watching, and you couldn't get your husband to watch because, we think we know everything. I mean, this is how men think, ladies. I was a kid. I know how to raise one. Well, that's about as smart as saying, I had surgery once. I can do a surgery. No. Okay. Just because you were raised and used to be a kid doesn't mean you know anything about raising kids. So I just want to say that to men. Men, your children need to hear you pray. The value of praying with your children isn't that God's going to answer all the prayers that you pray and that the simple, sweet prayers your kids are going to pray. Your kids, dads, need to hear you pray, and here's why. Because when my children heard me pray, they heard me submitting myself to my Heavenly Father.
That's good.
And that submission, seeing a man submit himself to a greater power, or to in our case, God, there's something so powerful about that, because we want our kids to learn to submit to authority and to submit to us, not because we're great, but it's learning to say yes. And I just think, dads, our kids hearing us submit to our Heavenly Father is a powerful, powerful thing. And it lays the groundwork hopefully for a lifetime of faith.
Yep.
And then the other thing that I've already touched on is we tied all of the do's and don'ts as it relates to our faith back to relationship. And if you've heard me preach, you've heard me reference the law of Christ. The law of Christ is we are to love others the way that God through Christ loved us. So we try to have a culture in our home of honor. We don't have to have a bunch of rules. We're just going to honor mom and tell each other the truth. And why are we doing that? Well, not because of the Ten Commandments and not because the Bible tells us so, but God honored us by sending his son. And so when we honor other people, that's our way of showing appreciation for what God has done to us. And every virtue and every discipline and every healthy expression of relationship is all tied back into what God through Christ has done for us. So that was kind of the sort of the spiritual framework for all of our conversations. And then I did, well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as it relates to all of that, a common question that we get asked all the time is, did you make your kids have a quiet time? Did you make your kids have a devotional? And, my answer to that is always no. We never made them, but we modeled it, we encouraged it, and we made it easy. We wanted them to see us having our time alone with the Lord, so we modeled it. We encouraged it by talking about it, by giving them instructions about this is how you do it. These are the different parts of having a quiet time. And then we made it easy. We worked really hard to make sure they always had an age-appropriate Bible. Yep. We made sure they had devotionals that they would be interested in.
And let me just say this: every Easter, they had an Easter basket, and every Easter, Sandra put a brand new devotion book in each of our kids' baskets. We didn't say, have you read it? Have you read it? Have you read it? But it was just a reminder in this season and this year, here's something else. Because, devotional tools, they get old after a while. Anybody that gets a new book, at least you're going to pick it up and start reading. So she made it, that was such a great discipline and a habit, because it was just a reminder that this is something we want to keep in front of us.
I didn't start 2 weeks before Easter. I was on the hunt all year long for the perfect quiet time tools for my kids, because I felt like this is the way to encourage it and make it easy. So, so we never did, force it. We didn't say, okay, from, 7:45 to 8:15 is quiet time and everybody's going to get your Bible. We just wanted them to know this is important. It's important to us, and we're going to help you be able to do it.
Now, that was kind of the positive motivation. There was some negative motivation. And so I'll share this.
Right.
You know, I get a lot of email from people thanking me for messages.
It used to be letters.
Used to
Now
be
it's
letters,
usually-
yeah. So when I would get a real juicy one, like sin, like really destroyed somebody's life and their life was lost in sin, and then they came to faith, I would bring those home. And at dinner time, I'd say, hey, I just want to read you an email. And I would read emails of, but we'll do anything for our kids.
He never used the real names.
No, I would just tell these stories basically to say, here's a person who made some bad decisions and look what happened. All right, you guys go do your homework. We'll talk about it later. So again, trying just in the conversational way to keep just the real life stories of, you know, God has asked us to do certain things because he loves us. He's not, you know, a cosmic killjoy. So occasionally I would leverage an email.
That's great. You could forward some of those emails to us. We can use them with our kids. It sounds like a great idea.
Reese probably gets some of those. So.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you think about when your kids kind of started into that the teenage years and that season, what were things that you did to try to help encourage them in their faith in those years? This
is when the church became our partner. Now, the church was already a partner, but I'm telling you, to have small group leaders for our middle school and high school for kids who stuck with them, you know, through middle school and through high school. And then also student impact, where by the time they were middle school, they could begin to serve in Upstreet, and then in high school, serve in middle school. I'm telling you,
made all the difference for our kids.
This is why people hear me say, when it comes to our family ministry model, we are thoroughly satisfied customers because of the investment and the difference it made in our kids' lives. And preachers' kids can be a problem. I mean, preachers' kids, they just see the church a little bit differently. They live with the preacher. So to have other adults speaking consistently into our kids' lives, there's no way to put a price or value on that. We're so grateful.
There were times our kids would come home from small group or come home from being with their small group somewhere, and they'd say, you know what Joseph said, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I've said that 30,000 times. And they never heard me. Joseph Sojourner could say it one time, and he was a small group leader. He could say it one time, and it just made it all the way to his heart. So we are so grateful for all of our kids' small group leaders.
That's why I tell parents, especially when our kids are in middle school, look, you don't have to, you may not like the preaching, but I'm telling you, you need to get your kids in our church. Not because of what's going on now, but by the time they hit 16, they're going to have some relationships where some people can speak into their lives in ways that you're not going to be able to as a parent. And then, you know, the heartbreak is when, you know, a family would show up with their 17-year-old daughter, and we're trying to get our daughter involved. And of course, we would do everything we could, but you know what I was thinking? If you'd had her here when she was 12, she would be so locked in relationally, and trying to suddenly fast track relationships. We'll do our best, but relational ministry takes time. So I love our church, I love our ministry model, and we have benefited greatly from it. So we can't even take any credit for that.
Right. Yeah. I think that's so good. And we've experienced, our oldest has been in transit the last 3 years. And during the time of like sheltering in place and everybody staying home, I just felt like attitudes and, you know, everybody was just frustrated. And the first week that his transit group got to do a driveway group, and they just met in a park, 6 feet apart, everybody brought their own food. He just came home a different kid. Like his heart was just filled up, and we were amazed at the difference that it made in his heart just to be able to be with his people.
Oh, that's great.
Well, and we talked about groups and how much of a difference it makes for kids, for teenagers. What about you guys? How did you prioritize group through all those busy parenting seasons?
It was such a priority for us. It was always a priority. We met, usually it was on Monday nights. We had the same babysitter for years and years when our kids were small. But we just made it a non-negotiable for, you know, and it was, you know, being in ministry for those who are on staff or whatever, your Sundays aren't necessarily like everybody else's Sundays. And so our small group time was really our worship time. I mean, it was the time that we could just have those conversations and grow in our own faith and all of that, because Sundays have always been work days until now. And so, so it was just a priority.
And the thing too, I'm so glad you brought this up, because the other thing it did, our kids knew Monday night, our group's coming up, because we usually hosted at our home. So you go upstairs, you do your homework, and we don't want to hear anything. This is mom and dad's time. And so our kids saw us prioritize our own faith, saw us prioritize the value of small group, and it was so much easier to help them prioritize it as well, because they saw us do this Monday after Monday after Monday. And again, hearing us praying, sneaking down the stairs, sneaking into the kitchen, all those things that are going to happen.
Hiding a fart machine under one of the people in a small group.
With
And
the
having a remote control upstairs.
Yes.
That's brilliant.
I think that's only the second time I've ever even heard you say that word. You say it in front of 486 people. So anyway,
That's great.
And we had all the and two, please, our kids are so normal. We one of the things that we did as far as praying with them is once they were old enough, we would all pray together, and we would pray together in one of their bedrooms. And so finally one night, we would pray in Allie's room. I don't know why. And she said, Dad, the boys can't come in here and pray anymore. They just fart. And then my room smells. They make my room smell
before I
terrible.
go to sleep.
Right before I go to sleep. And so we had all the normal stuff. So then we moved out onto the stairs, and we started having what we called stair prayer.
Yeah.
So we would all meet on the stairs. And this went all the way through high school. So Sandra would say, okay, 8:30, no matter what's going on, 9 o'clock, no matter what's going on, meet on the stairs for stair prayer.
Yeah.
And then one night, I had the bad idea. It's just 5 of us. I said, instead of me praying, this is so bad. I said, I don't know why I thought that. I said, let's all just.
He went back to his youth group.
This
days.
went back to youth group. Let's just all pray for the person on our right. And no lie, our kids immediately jumped up and started moving around because they didn't want to pray for the next to. It's like, I got so mad, I said, okay, forget it. I'm just going to pray. Okay, just go to bed. So we did not have holy moments, but we
tried.
We prayed together, had stair prayer. And you know what's cool? Our foster daughter, who stayed with us about almost 3 years, who was a teenager during that time, we started having stair prayer, and most of the time it was just the 3 of us because the kids.
And half the time she was really mad at us while we were having stair prayer, but she wanted stair prayer anyway.
And so she was in a small group at Inside Out, and we hosted an event. And she asked me when they all got here, she said, Mr. Andy.
She didn't say Mr. Andy.
What did she call me? She's calling me Andy. She's Andy. She said, could we do stair prayer with my small group?
Because they've all heard about it.
I know. So we gathered a whole small group, and we had
on our stairs.
Stairs and stair prayer. So that was, again, just keeping it. It was very real. Please don't imagine angels and soft music and work. It was short and back to homework. So
that's right.
That's great. How did you guys manage to find time to prioritize your relationship with each other, or even just to prioritize kind of your own quiet time and time to yourself?
Yeah. Well, we made a commitment early on that every year, even when our kids were small and we had to get babysitters and all that, we were going to get out of town together at least once a year.
For a couple, maybe 3 nights.
Yeah. And we did that. And, it sounds like such a small thing. And then on the other hand, it sounds like, how do you even do that? I mean, it's so complicated with babysitters and schedules and all. It was so worth it. There were times leading up to it, I thought, this isn't even worth it. Let's just forget it. It's too hard. And it was always so worth it. It was just that time to reconnect, to be uninterrupted, to make plans, to laugh, to talk, to be in control of the conversation, talk about what we wanted. It was just a great reset button for us. It was an annual thing. Several years we were able to do it twice, more than once. But it was just that was another one of those non-negotiables for us, and it was great for us.
And we never had a date night. Now, I know a lot of couples do Thursday night's date night no matter what. I think it's a great habit. We just never did that. What we would do is I would come home when they were a little bit older, and she would get in the car, and we would say, we're going to go drive around. And we would have kind of a car, just drive around for an hour, get some coffee, then come back when they were old enough to stay by themselves. So the way you ask the question is part of the answer. You just have to prioritize it, and every family's different, every rhythm's different, but
every season is different, even in the same family.
Yeah.
So,
and we put our kids to bed really early when they were young,
7:30.
Early, because
when they were little.
Because you need that. You got. We heard early on, you are already a family before you have kids. Your kids are a welcome member. but they don't make you a family. And that helped us to realize we have added, when Andrew was born, we're already a family. So he's a welcome member. He doesn't make us a family, and he's not the center of the family. And as you know, it's hard to keep kids from becoming the center of the family. We saw some families that modeled this so well when we were younger. And again, we were scared because we work with enough middle school and high school kids to know this can be terrifying if you don't get it right on the front end. So we were motivated, and we were students. So
I'll tell one more story, though, related to that. This was before we even had it. We were leaving the church parking lot one Sunday, and we looked over in the car next to us, and there was a mom sitting in the back seat with the car seat, and the dad was sitting in the front. And so she was clearly, in the back. And Andy just looked at me. He said, "Please don't ever do that." I think I was pregnant, maybe with Andrew. He said, "Please don't ever do that." And it dawned on me that was the very beginning of me realizing I am going to have to be intentional to make him feel like my priority, even in the midst of parenting years.
She was going to have 2 kids. She already had one. She just didn't know it.
Sitting in the back seat with your infant carrier, but it was just one of those things that I thought, if that's a small thing that I can do to make sure that he feels like he is my priority, then that's not a big sacrifice. The child is going to be fine in the back seat for 20 minutes getting where we're going. And so that it was just sort of a little, I don't know, a mental thing for me that just set me on a path of being intentional about making him feel like the priority, even in the midst of the parenting years.
She's always been great. Thank you.
I love that. That small investments over time have a big impact. And I think during this, COVID season, we've had a lot of dates at the grocery store. I'll be honest. Like, that's been a popular date spot for us.
Sometimes we go 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah. Drive the long way. We'll take the long route.
That's hey, again, you find your rhythm to stay connected. So.
That's right. That's right. Okay, Sandra, specifically. So for the mom or even the dad who just feels overwhelmed right now, what advice would you give them? Like, just in the midst of all this, I just feel so stressed. I feel so overwhelmed.
Yeah, I guess I would say something that my mom said to me so many times when I would call her in frustration. It is, this is just a season. It seems like whatever season we're in, it feels like our life. This is my life. But the truth is, it's just a season, and every season transitions to something else. So recognize that it's just a season, and that your child, the one that's, making the messes and driving you crazy and doing all the things, they're going to be 25 one day. They're going to be 30 one day. They're going to have full frontal lobe development, which is awesome when they get that.
Can't wait.
They're going to be 25. They're going to be 30 with a story to tell.
Yeah.
And what you're doing now is building the story that they are later going to tell. So take a deep breath. Remember, it's just a season. And make those hard decisions. Get rid of those things that are hard. Say the no's for now when you need to. But just remember, you are doing an incredible work, and you are building a story that your kids are going to one day tell.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Building a story. So on that, we want to help as a church. If you're a parent out there and you're looking for help, how do I help build that kind of story for my kids? We want to help. So we have a digital parent summit I want to tell you about. It's going to launch on August 28th. We've lined up some great expert speakers that are going to speak into various different issues about child development. Dave Thomas and Sissy Goff are going to speak about stages of development and what that means for your parenting. We've got Dr. Chinwe Williams, who is going to speak about how to be aware of your child's mental health during this season in particular. And there's even going to be content from you guys, some past content from Andy and Sandra in a section on the site called From the Vault. So from the vault, which sounds like Disney. I think that's what they used to say, from the vault. But anyway, so the best part about this is that it's completely free. You can access it anywhere at any time from August 28th to October 2nd. And you can register at northpoint.org/parent summit. The link is in our bio. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can click the banner below. So as we kind of wrap up here, Andy, any last words or encouragement for parents that are watching this interview?
Yes, and this is hard for me to say. So I know this is old, to date myself a little bit. Trace Adkins was right. You're going to miss this. Remember that song? You're going to miss it. You really are.
Yeah, it's a good song.
You're going to wish these days hadn't gone quite so fast. We look at the pictures of our kids at those different seasons, and we miss those children. And we're so grateful that they are where they are, but we miss those kids, and I'm so grateful we didn't miss many moments with them. So mom and dad, don't miss it. You don't get to have it back. It happens once. There's only one first grade year. There's only one eighth grade year. There's only one ninth grade year. There's only one high school graduation. These are ones, and you don't get them back, and just don't miss them.
That's incredible. Well, thank you guys for investing this time and these words into our church family and all those watching. What an incredible opportunity. So thank you. As parents, we're really grateful.